So good morning, everyone. I know you're all very busy people, so we really appreciate you taking the time out to spend with us today. Before I get into our slides, thanks, Ian, I wanted to just set some context as to the content of our presentation today. So we're not going to do anything about our products or our sales. I am HR and Lindsay is talent acquisition, so you're not going to get any of that from us. What we wanted to do was to address three areas, three pieces of feedback that we got from you after connecting last year, our Talent Connect last October, and then through the various conversations that you've had with your account managers at LinkedIn. And the three things that you've asked to know more about is, one, how do we do things at LinkedIn? What's our secret sauce? Two, what are we focused on from a strategic perspective, and specifically in Europe, and specifically how do we use data to help us with that? And thirdly, how do we unite talent acquisition and the HR functions and the broader HR community? Because we know that in some of your organizations, they are completely separate. So in trying to address those three things, we're going to share with you an actual business challenge that we have today and in the future, and how we've come together, Lindsay and I and our teams, to build out a comprehensive plan and hopefully solve that problem. So our journey starts with the economic graph. And I'm not going to go into this, you heard Chris talk about it earlier on. But what does that mean for us as a HR organization? Well, firstly, it addresses some of the Gen Y that Tara talked about in terms of creating a purpose. And for anyone that has read any of the recent blogs on war and talent, you know that our millennials want a purpose. So, fantastic, it looks after that. But it creates a massive challenge for us in the HR organization. How do we help the company and how do we enable them to deliver on this strategic and big dream that we have? And in thinking about scaling the organization, we think about org design. We think about, do we have the right people in the right places, locations? We have 9 offices in 9 different countries right now with plans to go to market in some new countries in the next couple of years. We also think about our org health. Are we performing at the right levels? Do we have that right gender balance? Do we have the broader diversity set and the cognitive set that Tyra talked about? Then we look at our leadership capability. And if you look at the fact that we have been in hypergrowth over the last number of years, a lot of our managers and leaders have progressed their careers very quickly at LinkedIn, much faster than they may have done in more established organizations. And in fact, 1 or 2 are in the biggest jobs of their careers to date. So they just don't know what they don't know. And so that creates a challenge for us in the HR organization. And then lastly, succession planning. When we think about our bench strength, what does that look like? Do we have skills gaps? Do we have that by geo, by line of business? And also, do we have successors at all? We've been growing so quickly, we haven't really thought about that. And so in trying to think about all of those things, and particularly given our rate of growth, we wanted to build out a comprehensive plan to look at that. And that plan, with Lindsay and I and the broader team at the leadership level across Europe, is comprising, I should say, of 5 pillars. The first one is talent analytics. So understanding the size of the problem, understanding the data, looking at the skills gaps, looking at the various different metrics that drive our business. Succession planning. Do we use the same traditional models and methods that we've always used? So let's be honest, putting a name in a box, and then maybe doing a few actions, but really not looking at them, and then we do the same thing again the following year. Sound familiar? And then we were looking at employer branding. And a lot of us have talked about this consistently over the last couple of years. Lindsay and I are going to talk about it from 2 different angles. I'm going to focus on internal employer branding, and Lindsay will talk about external. We at LinkedIn are very much focused on the internal branding piece first, creating our brand ambassadors. And again, I spoke about that here last year. But what's the evolution of that? And then Lindsay's going to talk about the last 2 areas, which are around our talent attraction strategy, specifically for that senior leadership level to help close some of the gaps that we have, and talent pipeline, which is probably one of the areas that you've heard most from us at LinkedIn. And so, moving quickly on, we believe it's absolutely imperative for us to have a united HR team, or GTO as we call ourselves, Global Talent Organization, in order to deliver on those 5 pillars. And so, I've spoken to a number of you over the last couple of years, and on a personal level, some of the challenges you have in your companies, where HR and TA are completely siloed, and sometimes they're actually working across purposes. And so we wanted to try and address that question and to be very transparent with you, because it may seem like we're completely buttoned up in everything that we do at LinkedIn. Well, it's just not true. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. And so what we have done, myself and Lindsay, is we've come together over the last couple of years, and we've had very open and honest conversations with each other about how we break down those silos, how we create a cohesive team, and how we come together to be successful. And the likelihood of being successful together is much higher than working alone and apart. And over time, we have built out some principles by which we work, and I wanted to share those with you, just in case your organization is suffering from some of that silo mentality. So the first one is around, we will not let each other fail. So essentially, we have each other's backs and that of our teams, and we encourage the TA and the HR teams to collaborate with each other, to be grateful for each other, and to help each other out. We then look to be ambassadors for each other. And that means leveraging every opportunity that we operate in the business with and let them know that we are one HR team, one GTO, and we never allow them to play us off each other. It doesn't happen in our world. How do we do that? Communicate, communicate, communicate. We always share with each other what's going on. We never let each other get blindsided. And lastly, we seek to understand. And I suppose this comes from Fred Kaufman, who's written a book called Conscious Business. We're very lucky to have Fred at LinkedIn. He supports our executive development. And seeking to understand is, dealing with those situations which we all do on a day-to-day basis, where somebody does something stupid, or they say something stupid, and you want to throttle them. And, they're never in your own team, of course. They're always in someone else's team. And so we have a kind of a principle that we work by, which is seek to understand why they did what they did and believe that it comes from a place of positive intent. And when you have that philosophy, over time you build trust. And as we all know, trust equals consistency over time. So we haven't always had the magic secret sauce, TA and HR together aligned, but I'm delighted to say that we do today. And that's really important in trying to address this scaling the organization challenge that we have. So, moving on, getting back to the scaling the organization. The first thing that we looked at is data. How do we leverage the data? We have so much of that at our hands. We're very lucky at LinkedIn that we can access our own platform to gain insights. But specifically, what we looked at was our org effectiveness and our org health. Some of it is very standard data, looking at time and role, promotion rates, spans of control, movement and mobility around the organization. But we also looked at our talent flows, where we were losing people to and where we were hiring from. And we looked at that in two ways. From a cultural perspective, are we hiring too many people from the same company, and is that changing our kind of inner culture? And secondly, from a seniority perspective, where are the people that are at those senior levels leaving to, and where are we hiring them from? And then we also looked at our employee engagement. So as I said, it's been really amazing results over the last number of years. But we know, because we've done some predictive analysis, that we're probably going to take a dip in the next 18 months to 2 years. So really deep diving into that data to understand where that will happen, what functions, what parts of the geography, and trying to get ahead of that. And then lastly, around diversity. Now, diversity is a very large spectrum. And when we looked at all the different types of diverse groups that we have, we tried to make a very thoughtful decision around where can we get the most traction in the shortest period of time. And we decided that was in gender. That we do have two problems as a result of all of this data. Our size of problem is, one, we don't have a senior leadership problem today, but we predict we will have in the next 18 months because of our growth patterns. And two, particularly in our sales functions, at the most senior sales levels, we have a massive gap in terms of gender diversity. It's pretty much all men. So what are we going to do about that? So, first of all, we looked internally and we looked at our succession planning. Do we have that talent pipeline coming through the organization, both in terms of potential leadership and in terms of gender? And again, back to, as I said earlier on, are we going to use the same methodologies that we've used in the past, which, to be honest, haven't been very successful for us? And the answer was no. So we decided to do something different. We decided to change up our succession planning process and how we identify top talent and key talent. So from a succession perspective, we started to move away from the typical names in an org chart boxes and move to a more comprehensive or 360 approach. So, for example, on May 13th, in the next few weeks, I'm having an offsite with the EMEA leadership team. And at that offsite, we're going to be focused on succession planning, only looking at our director and above population. And who's in the room? Not only do we have all of the lines of business leaders, but you'll have me from HR Business Partnering, you'll have our head of exec recruitment, and you'll have our L&D partner. And the reason the three of us come together is that we start making more informed decisions about the talent we need in the future. Do the skill sets, the competencies, the diversity of thought that we have today, is that what we need for the future, or do we need something different? And it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for our leaders. I've been prepping them for this since January, because I'm asking them to basically backfill themselves, and they don't have any plans to go anywhere, so you can imagine it's a little awkward. But I think this is necessary to get us to that place where we will have contingency plans and we can really scale the organisation in a thoughtful way. The other thing that we did was 9-box models. How many people have heard about the 9-box model for assessing talent? Quite a few. Most companies typically use this globally. And basically, it is an axis where performance is measured on one side and potential on the other. And normally and traditionally, potential just means, can this person step up into the next role, or 2 roles, or 3 roles over a period of time? And again, we felt that was quite subjective. There really wasn't a whole lot of thought put into that. And so as a result, people were put into succession boxes and then ultimately given jobs that they weren't ready for or they didn't want. And so we've changed that to call it potential to scale. And it is comprised of 3 areas. The first one is, do they have the learning agility to do this job? Do they have not only the intellectual horsepower, but can they learn quickly and on the fly? We often refer to it as we are building the plane as we're flying it. Secondly, we looked at aspirations. So again, in our old traditional model of succession planning, we didn't really care who was in the box. We were just going to make them do the job. But actually, do they want the job? If I think about my successors and my team, do they want to travel the 75% of the time that I travel? Possibly not. In fact, I know they're not. They're sitting at the back there and they told me that they absolutely don't want my job. So I have a problem. And then the third area is potential. And not just the potential to take on more roles, but the potential to broaden out their responsibilities, manage larger teams, manage across time zones, manage the pressure and the stress and the complexities that come with all of that. And of course at LinkedIn, because talent is our #1 operating priority, it's about being inspirational at leadership too. So easy peasy. So as you can imagine, changing up the model and the process and looking at what talent means in a different way has created a completely different slate of individuals from which we can now take from. And so, is that going to solve all of our problems? No, of course not, because that's just our internal pipeline. We also need to look at our external pipeline, which Lindsay will cover in a moment. But in order to attract people externally, we need to have a great talent brand. We need to be an employer of choice. And particularly at the most senior levels, we need to be seen as a great place to work. And so we've spent a lot of time over the last 3-4 years creating an amazing culture here across Europe and obviously here in the UK. We looked at making sure we were hiring the right people, so a little bit of conformity in terms of our culture and values, creating a fun and engaging environment to work in. And that includes us, as leaders, driving that and being in the middle of it. So the picture up here on the left of all the cowboy hats, that was me leading a line dance flash mob in front of 4,000 people in America. I challenge anyone to do that. It is a really scary thing to do, but it was fantastic fun. And really kind of bonded my team together. And then, it's about having all of that fun, but it's also about having a place where people can actually get their job done, be productive, and be successful. So it's just, we're not a creche, and we're certainly not, party central all the time. We do have to get work done. And then, for those that were here last year, you'll have heard me talk about brand ambassadors, kind of linking back to what Andy was talking about earlier on, about having our employees be our voice and be our brand. And so we nailed that in the first couple of days in their induction by helping them pimp out their profile, is what we call it, making sure that they understand how to have a great profile and that they are an ambassador for LinkedIn. But then we started to think about, well, what's the next stage of that? How do we evolve that? So, most people at LinkedIn have a pretty good profile. So now we're all about storytelling. We have moved that paradigm along, and now it's about creating individual career stories from our employees. And as part of that, we encourage them to tell their learning stories and what they have learned, the skills and competences that they are learning at LinkedIn. And one example of that is we have a rotational program in Dublin, in our HQ, which is called Rotate In. And for those that have read the Alliance book that Andy mentioned, our co-founder, Reid Hoffman, talks about Rotate In. And it's basically for our early in career employees. Those folks that, maybe their parents forced them into a particular career, or they didn't know what they wanted to do and they kind of fell into it. We give them an opportunity to rotate around all the support functions for a period of 6 months to figure out maybe they're in the wrong area and maybe they want to go and do something else. But as part of that now, one of the things that we've mandated is that they have to blog and post the whole way through their journey and how they have transformed as part of being on that program. It is internal and external PR gold. And it is exactly as Andy referenced earlier on, it's about leveraging the resources that you have around you, and for us, that is our employees. So that is part of the journey in terms of trying to solve the senior leadership gap that we have. Lindsay's now going to talk to you about the external elements of that and talent acquisition. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Hello, all. It's fabulous to be in wonderful, sunny London. Always a little bit sunnier than Dublin, but I will not hold that against you. So we're on an incredible journey. It's been pretty crazy at LinkedIn. And the topic of talent brand is more important to us than ever before, because we are scaling our organization to new heights, new markets, new talent profiles, and we're doing that in a massively competitive space. Our mission is LinkedIn on LinkedIn. What that means is that we have to be the best at our products and leverage them in the right way. And that's been fabulous to a certain point, but we are changing. And we're going to start to explore how we take our talent brand beyond LinkedIn. A little bit nervous for us to be able to do this. When it comes to talent brand, I think we're good. But I think that we need to be great. And the secret sauce that Wendy mentioned is storytelling. And when I think about storytelling, and you've already seen this morning, the following statistic really resonates with us. And all of the information that you've been seeing this morning, our talent pools, talent analysis, our talent flows, we get to play with that on the talent acquisition team, which is pretty amazing. But we want to be able to empower our talent to tell our message. So when it comes to empowering our talent, there's a couple of key things that we're going to start thinking about. We are just about to form a talent brand team. And that kind of shocks a lot of people because they assume that we have a backup of a lot of expertise when it comes to branding, but actually we don't. But we need to. Very important. So we're starting to look at what our branding voice is. And how is it going to differentiate as a company? What's the tone of that voice? Is it a very powerful, unique voice? And how are we saying what we're saying, not what are we saying? When it comes to master storytelling, we train absolutely everybody. It's actually a performance management metric for the recruiting team. Storytelling is something that we want to elevate up. So we're now pursuing our leadership team to tell stories. We're pursuing our high performers, we're pursuing the entire talent team, and we want to go beyond. We want to create a hunger for content amongst potential talent. It blows my mind at times the power of picture sharing. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I'll give you a quick example. Manuel, who's on our London team, celebrated his birthday a couple of months ago. We tend to post out pictures. And the picture of the birthday cake within 72 hours had 6,400 views. It's absolutely crazy, but great crazy, because it's highlighting our brand and it's highlighting a little bit about us and what we do together as a talent acquisition team. So when it comes to talent brand, we're just at the beginning. And I'm actually really keen to hear about what Harrods are doing because I've heard fantastic feedback. So it has been crazy at LinkedIn in the 4.5 years that I've been here. It's been hard to catch my breath, and we've expanded the team. We've really invested in the talent acquisition team because we're going to continue growing. But it's changing, to Wendy's point. It is becoming about the longer term and not the shorter term. And with change comes an impact to our talent attraction. And our talent acquisition journey is about to become a lot more thoughtful, much more collaborative, and also about the longer term. So I want to share a specific example of what that means. So we'll take Bizzo. So we acquired Bizzo last July, and with that acquisition, we knew that it was going to change our profile of hire. And I wanted to stop being reactive. I think that's something that we battle with all the time in TA. You know, a role comes up, we're about to grow a team, we're about to grow a market, and talent acquisition are going to solve all our problems because they know our profile of hire already, they know the job description, and off they go, and there'll be profiles available straight away. That's not the reality of the situation, as we all know. So what we wanted to do is get ahead of it. So there's two markets in particular that we're growing the Bizzo team. It's London and Dublin. So to make this happen, we wanted to come together as a talent team first. So how were we going to elevate our partnerships? The stakeholder relationship management and influencing is another performance metric for the recruiters at LinkedIn. So when we got together as a talent team, we really wanted to know, particularly in talent acquisition, what is the impact on the org with this change? How do we in talent take our role and responsibility seriously to support the marketing solutions business in this growth? We had Bridget, who's our HR business partner, Jerome, who's a TA lead on my team, come together and take a seat at the marketing solutions leadership team. Now, I will say that most of our TA leaders, including myself, with the HR business partner, are always at the table. And I think that's something that's absolutely powerful to the success at the scale of any of our organizations. But we knew that they were going to be nervous. And this is nervous for us too, it's very different. But we wanted to make sure that we were partnering together to influence, to guide, to coach, to ask questions, and to be just there as a support pillar. Plus, we were going to be working with the co-founders of Bizzo, who didn't really know what it was going to be like to work at LinkedIn or to understand our culture in order to attract this talent. So when we have the partnership in place, we look at the next thing, which is the profile of hire. Now, I heard about the two titles, and I hadn't got a bloody clue what they meant. So we were hiring a Mac and a Mass. So, you know, typical hiring manager comes to you, I'm hiring a Mac and a Mass. Okay, brilliant. Well, what does that look like? So what we decided to do was, again, with Jerome and Bridget taking the lead, we then looked at the talent acquisition team and who we're going to put in place. So James, as you've heard mentioned today, is our UK lead. We've also put Radina in place, who sits in the Dublin team, and also Sophie. Sophie is part of our sourcing team, but she also has an insights background, so to bring the insights team in as well to really help us. And you look at typical things like getting everybody in a room. So every Monday, 3 p.m., Josh Graff, who runs our marketing solutions business, has the TA team in, and it takes 3 goes to get this right. It's actually quite fascinating how they don't know what they don't know, and by getting them in a room, listening to what they had to say, observing their skills, or understanding their profile of hire, it was all quite different. So how did we make sure we got them on the same page? We did it eventually, but we knew by going to market, we would be educated more. What we did know was marketing automation and the skill that we were looking for with this profile of hire was going to be very, very unique and challenging. So, with that, what's the acquisition strategy? And these are all things we needed to know first before we engaged with the market, even before we posted these roles. We wanted to be connected together. The acquisition strategy for us is where we started to explore talent brand. But talent brand while leveraging our employees, who are, in my opinion, our strongest recruiters. We heard that from Sage as well today. We also wanted to look at the collateral that we had, the media that we could use, the content that we could actually share. But most importantly, we were about to change the marketing solutions story that we tell to candidates. And together we had to be trained on what that was. We also looked at compensation. You know, can we afford? Are we competitive with this profile of hire? What are the levels? You know, how do we make sure we understand in our competitors what are they paying and what challenges will we face? But ultimately, what's the EVP? What is this talent looking for, and how can we make sure that we provide it? The last thing we looked at was the talent flows. So, really curious to understand amongst our competitors and where we see this talent sitting, what's the win-loss rate? Where do they attract talent from, but where do they lose talent to? What are the skills that they're acquiring? What's the reputation of these individuals in market? What information can we find out about them? And how do we bring it all into what will be our addressable market approach? So connecting together as one talent team We then start the journey of, well, let's start to dip our toes into the market and find out if that talent is curious, hungry, and very interested in joining LinkedIn. I've heard this a million times over the past, very strongly in the past 18 months. And I have to admit, at the start, when I heard about data, I was quite nervous. I think it's taken a lot of change to make sure that we leverage data. But my God, the power of data is just so important to the future of your talent acquisition strategy. So from a data perspective, what we wanted to do was, with knowing our profile of hire, being very clear on what we were going to go after, how do we truly understand the market? We're a country and language-aligned talent acquisition team. Very multilingual orientated. We make sure that everybody in the team truly understands the 9 markets that we support. They should be and are the market experts. So what can we find out about this new profile of hire to help us be better partners to the business? We actually started to reach out and talk to people that were experts in this field so that we can get acquainted with what we're about to start. And before we do a lot of our addressable market work or even start reaching out to candidates, we use what you have seen today. So all the talent pool analysis, we work with our insights team, all the talent flows, all the competitive information that we can do. Our sourcing team are trained to provide that information to the recruiting team and ultimately to our hiring managers as well. So you start the TAM, the total addressable market. The sourcers take the lead on this. This is primarily their role. And what we do is, based on what we've discussed, we start to do our outreach. Now, in the talent acquisition team, we have 3 main sources of hire consistently, and they tend to change. Internals, so you heard Chris mention the power of transformation at LinkedIn, referrals, and then the recruiter hunting talent themselves. We take the hunting approach when it comes to really figuring out our core. Your core is your red carpet. They're the people that absolutely match that profile of hire. They're the people that we're going to give that extra service to. So we look at our in-mail. What is the in-mail? What is the message that we're going out with? Who sends the in-mail? It's far more powerful coming from the hiring manager. Does the hiring manager have time to do this? How can we encourage them to do it? Or when the recruiter sends an in-mail and we don't get a response, how do we have the hiring manager to come in and take over? But your red carpet and your core people are the people that you need to keep engaged, even if the opportunity isn't right for them now. Your nurture quadrant, they're absolutely the right fit for LinkedIn, not this role, but we really want to find a way of talent pipelining them to have them keen and curious on LinkedIn in the future. The building awareness and the telesales piece are still part of our follower ecosystem. We want them to follow LinkedIn. We want them to be curious about careers. We're going to continue growing our organization and our company, but how do we keep them part of what we're doing? So the likes of the media solutions products that you see, we also leverage quite frequently as well, with specific purpose. And what we've got to make sure that we do is we have to commit to a talent pipeline strategy. Chris mentioned that he went for coffee with a candidate. Our hiring managers, even when they're not hiring, have to commit to at least 2 coffees a month with passive talent. The best way that we can engage with passive talent, and we've had this feedback, is softly. So it is about inviting someone in for a cup of coffee. It is about sending that email. It is about that soft approach. So all this body of work has been done, and you've got the recruiter, you've got the sourcer, you've got the TA lead, and you've got the HR business partner constantly taking the marketing solutions team along this journey. And we're asking for input, and we're asking for feedback, and we're adapting our profile as we're going along. But what it's helping us to do is, and I mentioned more thoughtful, it's helping us to be more precise. Much more precise with the engagement and the outreach that we're going to do. We've been reactive for a very, very long time. And that's normal. I think that's absolutely normal for our profession and also for the growth of some of our organizations. But what we want to start focusing on, because we've invested in our talent acquisition team to do so, we've also invested in helping our hiring managers become better recruiters, but better talent acquisition partners, is to just prioritize a lot more and be a lot more planful. So the method that you see above on the screen is about understanding how to engage with talent once, how to make sure when you engage with talent it is the right profile of hire, those conversations are higher, there's a higher return on investment. It's a much more tailored outreach. You've got to think about how you want to outreach depending on the level of hiring you're going to do. You've got to be able to understand this activity Our recruiter product shows us the activity. We actually give access as well to our hiring managers. There's a hiring manager tool on Recruiter, and they proactively go and help us build our pipeline too. But what we also have figured out is by doing TAMs, we're becoming much stronger at understanding our market inside out. We've got the pulse on what our competitors are doing, and you always have to be one step ahead. So to really summarize what we've both been chatting about is in order to get this right, and we are going on a different journey, and it's just the start, and we certainly don't know everything. We think we do, but we actually don't. It is very important to make sure that talent analytics is on board, you've got the right information, you've got the right data. I will say about data that you've got to understand the insights that you're pulling from the data and what you're going to do with it. So what's the so what? It is about succession planning. It's extremely important to understand the potential gaps that we have in our organization, but also the internal talent that we can flourish and send up. Employer branding, topic of choice for many of us, particularly LinkedIn at the moment. What are we doing and how do we do it well? But actually, what is our EVP? Talent attraction, very important. What do we need to adjust? What do we need to change? What's working? What's not working? And how do we make sure our recruitment team are best on planet when it comes to that? And the final piece is pipeline, which I'm sure most of you get a lot, so I don't have enough pipeline. How do we empower our recruiters? How do we empower our hiring managers and our employees to be our talent pipeline and to help us on that acquisition strategy as well?
And to summarize, we just wanted to pull this all together and share with you that it's about getting the plan, but doing it together. And the more that we can have a combined approach to things, the more successful we believe we will be. It's about leveraging the data, but using that for the insights. Data is useless just by itself. It's like, what does it actually mean? And then what decisions does that inform? Uniting the team towards a common goal. So for us in this example, it's around how do we scale our senior leadership, including having a diverse set at that top level for the next 3 to 5 years. Leveraging some of the examples that we've already done it in, working with the TAMs, getting really laser focused on what we want and where we're going to get it. And then going and executing. We can't give you the outputs of that particular execution because we haven't done it yet. May 13th is the deadline. And then we're going to present to actually our global CEO, Jeff Weiner, and the executive team that week also. So we'll share with you that output next time round, and also how we've measured that success, because what we're presenting to Jeff is really just the proposal and part of the plan, but the next 3 years is going to be the full output. So watch this space. Let's see how we do. And we believe we're going to be successful. Thank you so much for listening to us today.
Thank you.